Hello, everyone. Welcome back. And yeah, warm welcome from the offices, Emeric offices here in Munich. I'm happy to be back with the 20th episode already of our Digital Trader Summit series, which we bring to you since about a year now, since we are in partial lockdown. So I think it's still one of the best ways to use the time we have right now. And I'm super excited to have a very good guest with us again, Emeric de Vigan. He was himself an energy power trader for many years, some big trading houses. And then he made the same career switch as I did a little bit, went to the startup world a few years back to share his knowledge in energy trading with the energy community. So today he's serving some of the leading trading houses in Europe with his data analytics solutions and with his price predictions. I think many of you will know him already, and I'm always impressed if I see his solutions predictions, how really data can translate into some very tangible information today. And yeah, the focus today, and this is why he's in his role as an expert on the French power market with us, is that we want to look a little bit explicitly beyond the German market. About 80% of the new customers who join the enmacc platform are actually non-German. So many of them come from the French market, from the Spanish market. So we thought it's an excellent idea to have one episode and have Emeric explain us a little bit this mysterious French power market, which has its special conditions and players and etc. And I'm really curious to learn more in today's session. Thanks, Emeric, for joining us, and I'm directly handing over to you.
Thank you very much, Jens, and welcome everyone. Thank you, enmacc, for welcoming me to this webinar and giving me the opportunity to discuss a little bit the French market. So let's go straight to the point. The French market doesn't have the best reputation. You hear a lot about this French wholesale market. People say it's dangerous, it's illiquid, it's not stable. So the idea of this webinar is to go through the key drivers of the price. So obviously we're going to look at the supply and demand, but also we're quickly going to cover the market design and the regulation, with the idea to come up with as a conclusion with an outlook and open up the discussion on how things can move and what has changed compared to where this market was nearly 20 years ago now, when the liberalization started. So to start, we obviously can't start talking about France without looking at the demand. As you probably know, the main important thing about the French demand is that it's very highly temperature sensitive. This is coming from the fact that in France, very different from Germany actually, we have a lot of electrical heating, which creates a huge increase of demand in the winter, huge demand of electrical demand when the temperature drops in the winter. The numbers are pretty impressive when you think about them. In the winter, the heating gradient is higher than 2 gigawatt per degree, which is the size of 2 nuclear reactors. So for every drop of 1 degree in temperature, you need to find more than 2 gigawatts of power. There is also a cooling gradient, but to be honest, it's not that clear how big it is. We're talking about 600 or 800 megawatts per degree in terms of increasing of demand when the temperature goes up. What's quite remarkable is that this gradient has been very stable in the last few years. It hasn't really changed, and even during last year with the Corona crisis, the gradient seems to have been pretty stable. Generally speaking, obviously without looking too much at 2020, which I'll cover in a few seconds, the demand has been going down year on year. It's been going down for two reasons. There's less and less industry, unfortunately, in France, and then the other driver is the energy efficiency initiative, which has properly kicked in and is impacting the demand, which I guess is a good thing. A little comment on the peak demand. Around 2000, it was really the topic everyone was discussing, because the peak demand was going up higher than the base load demand, and people thought that would create concern for the security of supply. This trend clearly has changed since 2015. The peak demand is not going up. It's not going up anymore. Just to be clear, where I'm talking not going up anymore, I'm really talking about the weather-corrected demand, which is the difficult thing in France, as the demand is so temperature sensitive. You have to correct for the actual weather in order to get an idea of the actual demand in normal conditions. Small detail for the people who like to run analytics on the demand. Like in every country, the live demand numbers that are published by the transmission system operators are forecast. So RTE publishes, in fact, two data sets. One is the live data set at 50 minutes granularity, but in fact, it's a forecast, because the only way to get actual demand is basically to do a forecast. And then a few months after, they would publish the consolidated data set, which is really the actual demand, and this one will be at 30 minutes granularity. Quick look on last year. We heard a lot about it. RT published a report recently about the demand destruction. We looked at it with a different angle, running a model, a prediction model that was calibrated before the Corona crisis. So this demand model is meant to predict what demand would have been in the so-called old world. And the interesting thing is that we're finding very similar numbers to RTE, so around 2.5 to 3% demand destruction, mainly at the beginning of the crisis. What is more interesting is that in France, the second lockdown in October has had a very, very limited impact on the demand from the number we are seeing. So that was the case for 2020, and it still is the case at the beginning of 2021. To conclude on demand, I want to quickly talk about the demand response, because it's an emerging market across Europe, and it is too in France. And it's actually been there's actually been demand response contracts in place for a long time in France. Some of them do directly affect the wholesale prices. So there's basically two mechanisms. The first one is demand response contracts based on tariffs. They're called EJP and tempo. So they are contracts where 22 days a year, customers get sent a signal where they know that for the next day, they will pay their energy a lot higher than during the other days. One of these contracts is managed by EDF. It's EJP contract. And by the way, it's not available anymore to customers. The other contract is tempo, and this contract is run by RTE. RTE runs the signal on these 22 meant to be tight days, where people will pay more for their electricity consumption. So these two contracts account for between 1,000 and 1,500 megawatts. So they have a direct impact on the demand, and it shows that somehow there is an elasticity of the demand to the price, which I mean, we very often take the assumption that there is no elasticity to price on the demand side, but these two contracts show that there actually is. So that's important to bear in mind, and it directly impacts the price. Then you have, like in many other countries, some OTC mechanisms for demand response to allow demand response company to actually act for their clients. In France, it's done by a mechanism called NEBEF. And obviously, the capacity mechanism, which I will discuss a little bit after, also provides a strong incentive for demand response, because it allows people to make considerable savings on their bill if they're able not to consume too much electricity in the right period. The last very important thing is all the contracts operated by TSO, so by RTE. RTE is running several call for tenders for load shedding. But it needs to be made clear that these are post-market mechanisms. and they are not directly impacting the market price. They more should be seen as reserves that RT is buying since France has a lot less coal units available for reserve than it historically had. On this reserve market, I think it's a very important market to look at. The reserve market is changing a lot and will continue changing with an harmonization of the sourcing of the reserves, and this, in my opinion, will have a direct impact on the different wholesale prices. So now let's jump to the supply, and obviously for the supply, the one thing you need to look at is the nuclear. It's a big topic. You can read a lot everywhere in the press. Just to be clear here, I'm strictly going to look at it from a pure impact on the wholesale price. I'm not pro renewables. I'm not pro nuke. I'm not against any, to be honest. But here, I really want to focus on facts and the impact on the power prices. So clearly, the French nuclear fleet is getting older and older, and we are seeing since 2015 a clear decrease in the generation. I want to put 2020 aside. I mean, we know it was a very special year, but even before that and before the closure of Fessenheim, we started seeing a decrease in the nuclear generation. And not only we've seen a decrease in the nuclear generation, but we've also seen a decrease in the actual availability of the units, which makes you think you can't say this decrease in the generation only comes from the fact that the nuclear has to adjust for the renewables. Clearly, there is something more happening. So for the nuclear availability and therefore generation has a strong seasonality, which makes sense. I mean, the producers try to make the units available when they are the most needed, which is in the winter. So following the maximum availability in the winter, you have a decrease of availability around spring and summer, where EDF can run all the maintenances. You very often hear about environmental constraints, cooling constraints. So in the summer, when the river temps gets too high, some units have to be shut down. I personally think it's not negligible, but when you look at the grand scheme of things, it's not a huge amount of electricity. One thing to notice is that these environmental constraints tend to impact much more the month of September than the month of August. Despite temperatures cooling down in September. Regarding nuclear availability and generation, obviously the biggest threat is the threat of a generic issue. We've seen that in the past. There's been some issue in 2016 and 2017. Most of the nuclear units have the same conceptions. I'm not going to go into all the details, but clearly, if they find a fault at one unit, this can lead to the shutdown of several units. And one needs to be very, very careful about that in terms of availability. You've seen in 2016 what it led to when they found the issue on the steam generator at a lot of different units. Beyond the actual generation of the nuclear fleet, there is the question of the transparency. Clearly, France hasn't been the best, we've got to be honest, in terms of transparency for the nuclear units. Very often, you are seeing much worse availability in real time than what was forecasted a few weeks or few months ahead. And basically, there are very often huge delays on the maintenance. They always get extended. So, you know, this difference between real-time availability and forecasted availability is not only coming from unplanned outages. We have noticed at COR-e, but I think all the market has noticed it, that you can't really take the return dates of the unit on the grid after maintenance for granted. You have to make assumptions. So As you can see on this chart, the magnitude of the delays is quite big. Here on this chart on the right-hand side, we've clustered the planned maintenances in 3 types: refueling, annual visit, 10-year visit, and we've looked at the delays, and you can see that it's very often not only 2-3 days, but 20 days, 40 days, 60 days delays compared to the initial planned length of maintenance. I think this is coming from the fact that on the one hand, the reactors are getting older. On the other hand, the constraints from the regulator are bigger and bigger, I guess because the public opinion is always pushing for more. So this has led to significant delays. It seems to us the situation is improving a little bit. On the table, you can see here, I've looked at the difference between the months ahead forecasted availability and the actual availability. So between 2016 and 2018, the situation really got worse and worse. There was very often more than 5 gigs difference between months ahead and availability. 2020 was better after 2019 stabilizing. So we think the situation is slowly getting better. Why is it getting better? Not sure. It's either that the length of maintenance is more controlled, or that there are some assumptions taken on potential delays on the works. Now, renewables. I'm just checking the time. The renewables. I mean, France has been quite slow in catching up with the general European trend on renewables, but clearly it's catching up since 2018. We're seeing a big increase in installed capacity. There is a lot of solar, a lot of wind wind capacity that is getting connected to the grid. And where it's interesting is that it creates a more and more stable generation. And obviously, I'm not going to deny that the renewable generation is viable, and sometimes you have no generation. But what you can see on the chart on the right is that there are less and less hours in the winter months where you have a very small renewable generation. You have just around in 2020 you had just around 10% of the hours where the total renewable generation, wind plus solar, was under 2 gigawatts. So clearly, the more installed capacity you get, the more contribution you have to the security of supply. And again, I don't want to enter into the debate, but the contribution of renewables, sorry, not the contribution, but the cost of renewables. I'm just strictly looking at the facts. The renewables do contribute to the security of supply. And the tricky thing with the renewables, and this is the topic of this slide, is to avoid the cherry picking. On the one hand, you can't choose a date where there was a lot of wind and it was very cold and say, look, there's always wind in the winter. On the other hand, it's not very honest to cherry pick a couple of hours where the wind generation was very low and it was very cold and say, look, it's France. When it's cold, there is no wind. What numbers show is that it's not true that when it's cold, there is no wind. There are some cold days, some cold hours with very little renewable generation. But when you look at how much installed capacity there is now, you can see that even in very cold situations, the contribution of the renewable is not negligible. So the way we've been looking at it is rather than taking seasonal average, that sometimes can be misleading because you tend to overestimate by smoothing the number, the renewable generation. We've been, for the example, rerunning the beginning of February 2012. So for those who don't remember, it was one of the biggest cold spells we had in the last 20 years, I would say. Probably don't remember any before. Was too young, and so we took the actual weather as it was, and we forecasted what the renewable generation would be with the actual installed capacity, and that is strictly talking about France. So when you look at it, there is an average on this very week that was one of the tightest we have had ever on the electricity market. There was there would be between 2000 and 2021 an increase of renewable generation of around 3 gigawatts, which I think we all agree you can't say is negligible. And if in any case, obviously it's variable, so you need to be careful from a pricing point of view. You can still have some very expensive hours where you have very low generation. Clearly, the renewables, with the amount of megawatt hours they produce, contribute to the security of supply, and they also contribute to lowering the prices in case of a cold spell, because they allow to save hydro, they reduce the fatigue of the system, because then the units don't have to run full speed for days and days. And clearly, I think this is the reason why in the recent cold spells we haven't seen very high prices like some market participants were expecting. Now, the market design and the regulation. This in my opinion is a big one. I mean, France has let's be honest, has a difficult relationship with markets. I think we could write an entire book about it. And it's true that the regulatory framework hasn't been very stable in France. So yes, the market is open, but we still have some strange mechanisms, very heavily regulated, that are leading to a kind of hybrid market where you have public regulation together with the private sector initiative. So in terms of regulation, the big one is obviously the ARENH. So the ARENH is a mechanism that forces EDF to sell 100 terawatt-hour of its nuclear generation to retailers for the end consumers at a fixed price, 42 euros per megawatt hour. The annoying thing there is that the mechanism is under review. Sorry for saying annoying, I just meant annoying from a visibility point of view. So we don't know exactly what's going to happen. Some people are pushing for a higher price, some people are pushing for bigger volume. So we don't exactly know what's going to come out of that, especially as it seems to be linked with the whole discussion around the reorganization of EDF called the Hercule project. Obviously, this is a good mechanism for the retailers for two reasons. One is the optionality, very good, because you can decide if you want to subscribe to ARENH or not. And the other things that you hear a little bit less about is that also it reduces massively the cost, the financial cost, of hedging your portfolio. Because with ARENH, you just have to deposit the bank guarantee, and then you don't have to deal with the margin calls, the initial margin, etc., etc. So it makes things a lot easier for retailers. As you probably have heard, now the total demand of ARENH goes above 100 terawatt-hour. It was 146 terawatt-hour, I think for 2021, which is putting the customers, the final customers in a worse situation, because all the volumes that doesn't get sourced at the ARENH get curtailed and has to be sourced on the market by the retailers, which is leaving the customers with a variable price. The customer is, you can buy a contract in January 2020 for the next year. You don't exactly know what your final price is going to be, because your retailer is going to have to go on the market and buy volume in December after it finds out exactly how much capacity it's, how much volume, ARENH volume it has. So that's one of this very peculiar mechanism we have in France. Another one that is not specific to France, some other countries have implemented it, is the capacity mechanism. So again, it was meant to guarantee the security of supply, promote investments. I think it's been providing some good support for demand response, which is very positive. Because again, if you can shut down your demand when you have your capacity obligation, then you save a lot of money. So to make it very simple, this capacity mechanism is based on two signals. The PP1 signals is a certain amount of days where the retailers have to prove that they own enough capacity certificates to cover their portfolio demand during these days. And the PP2 signal is a signal where either producer or demand responder have to show they were either producing or available. And the reason why I'm saying it here is that these are strong signals to get people to be available, to incentivize people to be available, and can have a direct impact on the wholesale price. So that's a new mechanism that was introduced in 2017. Quick note on the impact of Brexit and interconnection. Since Brexit has left the European Union, the interconnectors between and UK are not allocated via the market coupling mechanism, which is leading to very unusual situation. Not unusual situation with the fact that the interconnector is optimized explicitly, and traders know how to do that. I mean, I think some of them are probably quite happy with it actually because they see opportunities. But the very strange thing is that you have two different exchanges in UK. In UK. So this isn't a very good situation for the UK market because market players tend to lose visibility and understanding of the price and don't know which benchmark they should use. Generally talking about the interconnection, clearly France is a very massively interconnected country. Interconnections do work very well to help the security of supply. We've seen that recently, not later than in January, you had weeks where France was importing from UK because UK had a lot of wind. You had other weeks where France was importing power from Spain. Typically, this month in March, you see a lot of imports from Spain in the solar production hours. So really things are moving very, very fast there on the interconnections. They optimize very dynamically by the exchange, by the market coupling mechanism. So this leads to a situation where France is not very often actually setting the price on the wholesale market. Whenever all the prices converge in Europe, the price very often gets set by gas units that are either in Germany, in Belgium, or can even be in Italy. So interconnection kind of forces anyone who wants to look at the French market to look at the surrounding countries, or I would even say anyone who wants to look at the German market can't ignore the French market. Again, we see that December, January, whenever there's a cold spell, whereas historically France was trading at a massive premium to Germany, the prices now tend to converge. And that would be the conclusion of my short presentation. I think France has become a little bit more civilized than it was before. And interestingly, we've moved from a situation where France was known from being very tight in the winter to a situation where the biggest problem in France is going to be managing the surplus of energy due to the lack of flexibility of some nuclear units. We are seeing that more and more. I'm not saying this will necessarily lead to a lot of negative prices, but that would definitely means more optimization on the nuclear fleet with some units that will have to be shut down for a few days, 1 day, 2 days, when the supply is when the renewable supply is very high. And I guess that would be my conclusion. I think the French forward market has become civilized, more transparent. There's more and more players. I mean, obviously, historically, it was massively dominated by the historical incumbents. There's more and more players now, so the forward market really is, in my opinion, a lot less dangerous, if I can use this word. Paradoxically, I think the very short-term markets are becoming more and more complex, with a lot of uncertainties around the market participants' strategies around the renewable optimization, optimization of flexible assets on the balancing market, and I think a lot of attention needs to be taken when looking at the very short term. Sorry. Thank you. That was my conclusion. Jens, I would give you the floor for any potential question.
Yes, thanks a lot. I mean, Emeric, this was a great overview. Thanks a lot, and leaves room for more questions. And I still see that we have a huge number of participants. I'm thanking every one of you. More than 250 participants at the moment. That's great. So please join us again as well with questions. Use the chat or the Q&A function you find on the bottom. I find some first ones. There's a question which we regularly discuss in all market settings. What is the impact of the CO2 prices on the French power market? Compared maybe as well to the impact on the German market, where I think there's a very explicit discussion around that.
Yes, there is the impact of the carbon is lower in France than it is in Germany. Because when France, it doesn't happen all the time, but when France prices at nuclear level, then the carbon price has no impact. So France is a lot less sensitive to the carbon than Germany. But that being said, France would be a lot less sensitive to the carbon than Germany if it was on its own. But now the markets are so massively interconnected that you can say that yes, France is less sensitive, but it's still driven by all the surrounding countries that are a bit more sensitive to the carbon price due to the amount of coal they still have in their stacks. Yeah,
very good point. I think that the focus is here. I'm just looking on the right side. There's one question around: do you consider the batteries in hybrid projects or standalone can transform the sector? You talked a lot about demand response and the flexibility. Do you see this coming in the French market? Is that an attractive model?
I'm afraid France is not the most attractive country at the moment for batteries. I mean, France is generally long, maybe a strong word, but it's longer than other countries in terms of flexibility, because it has a lot of hydro, a lot of spinning devices running. So it probably isn't the best. But with development of renewable, surely there will be adjustment made to the market design of this flexibility market to make it more attractive.
Absolutely. I'm looking into the questions. Some questions around the nuclear availability and the greater cycling of the nukes. Just a second. Have you observed greater cycling of the nukes during periods of high renewable or low demand to discourage negative prices?
Yes. Yeah. Yes, definitely. The nukes are ramping down for when there's very high renewables. But then you need to take a step back and look at where the demand can be. When the demand is around 60 gigawatts. Even if you have 15 gigawatts of renewables, the residual demand is still massively positive. So we're not yet in a situation where we very often have way too much supply. But yes, we're seeing a cycling of the nuclear. We're seeing a response of the nuclear to our renewables. But it's not very easy thing to do because there's only so much. You can't ramp down a unit below its minimum stable generation. Yeah. And once you reach that level, you have to stop the unit. And if it's a nuclear unit, you can't stop it down for 2 hours and ramp it back up. Yeah. So even though you have a high number of nukes, which are all coordinated, I guess, but there's some questions around the flexibility. It's still very limited. Yes. Yeah. Well, yeah, it's not infinite. It's not like the flexibility of a gas unit.
Then we have some questions here around the predictability or your outlook basically for this year, second quarter, third quarter of the availability. Is there any remarks you want to make or some predictions?
Yeah.
Is that possible?
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know what people say, it's very difficult to make predictions.
Yeah.
Especially when it's in the future. But I mean, clearly there are a lot of questions because as seen from now, the nuclear availability for the summer is meant to be very high, much higher than in previous years. I mean, of course, I think it's going to be lower than expected, but I still think it can be quite high. There's a few long-term issues that got solved at EDF, you know, Palo 2, Flamanville, for people who are following that, but these units have sorted their issues. Plus, I think the first, 10-year maintenance in order to extend the lifetime above 40 years has been done. So I think it's not unlikely that we have a decent nuclear generation in the summer. And also, obviously, with carbon price going up, you have a stronger incentive to run.
Yeah. So if I've understood you right, in your models, you take basically the planned outages and then you add some days for delays to make it more realistic. Plus, have in mind that there are some unplanned outages, sometimes even triggered by the planned ones. Yeah.
Yes.
That's
exactly that. And that could be the very easy way to do it. We're doing it in a little bit more detail because you have different types of units, and within even within the different type of units, 900 megawatts, 13 megawatts, 100 megawatts, 1500 megawatts, you have some good units and some bad units in terms of behavior. So we try to look at the behavior of every single unit.
Yeah, absolutely. You said that especially the short-term markets are sometimes hard to predict or very complex in its dependencies as well on the foreign countries. How's the market dealing with that? Do you see there still, from your point of view, really arbitrage opportunities, or is the market already on a level dealing with them in a very professional way? Yeah.
I think clearly the short term is being dealt with in a very professional way. Yeah. To be honest, I would even dare saying that when I started trading 15 years ago, I thought we were doing it in a professional way, but clearly the market has gone way further than that. And I think the main driver of that is the flow-based market coupling, where traders have lost the kind of intuitivity they could have on the prices. So you can't go on the short-term market without mobiles, without robots.
Yeah, I mean, we see that the French market is attracting new players as well, international players as well. From your perspective, what kind of opportunities are attracting them? Where do they see trading opportunities, arbitrage opportunities?
Well, I think most new players are trading either to sell final customers, being very strong development of retailers in France. And the others are very, very often now using France as a proxy, trading spreads against different countries. Because again, as it's a little bit less wide than it was before, it makes sense to use France as a proxy for hedging.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but still, I mean, the market suffers in some areas from the not perfect liquidity and the lack of players. I mean, we have, compared to other markets, significant lower number of players being active in this sense. I like this. In one discussion, an expert made the statement: in France, in Germany, you have 1,000 municipal utilities. In UK, have probably 1,000 brokers who try to organize liquidity and get it done. What is the French way going forward? How do you see that evolving?
I think it's very much going to depend on what happens with the RM, because in my opinion, the lack of liquidity is also a side effect of the RM. Because a lot of people, they have a portfolio of clients. They get 90% of the volume they need to hedge via the RM, and they don't really bother going on the market. Or at least, they're only going for 10% of the volume. So, strictly talking about the market point of view, again, I don't want to enter into a strange discussion, but strictly talking about the liquidity point of view, it would definitely be better without RM.
Yeah, yeah. And you don't want to make any predictions if this change of to 48 or so euros is coming, or?
I have absolutely no idea. Well, no idea. I want to discuss, but again, I think, in my opinion, the value of the RN is not so much for the price; it's for the optionality and the financial costs.
Yeah. While a 48 euro signal or so would have an effect, most probably as well on the renewable investments, no?
Yes, possibly. But again, it's an interesting point. I mean, this doesn't have any impact on the supply-demand balance. And the market got that wrong a few years ago, where the calendar product was stuck at 42 euros for months and months. And then one realized, well, it shouldn't be like that. So it's just a change of hands.
Yeah. But how you see the future of renewables now, the activity? I mean, looking back over the last 2 years, there's a strong trend in there. But is this kind of uncertainty regarding price developments or the regulatory regime holding back some investments at the moment, or is it independent of that?
No, I think it's independent. I think it's going to continue. I really think it's going to continue. There is a strong push from Europe, from domestic governments to increase to carry on with investing in the renewables. So I can't see that stopping at all. People still get kind of guaranteed prices. So in the short run, I'm not seeing this trend stopping.
All right, good. One question which we have as well twice is about cannibalization effects in renewables. Probably as well, they play a role in your modeling of the markets and looking into that. No, is it a big role as we have it in Spain or in the Nordics, where you have these cannibalization effects of especially the wind production?
Yes, definitely, and I get beyond all that. The good question is around the market design we have on the wholesale on the market at the moment. Is this energy only market design sustainable, or is it the best market design to have at the same time renewables and nuclear or conventional assets?
Right. Good. Let me go through the questions. We have received lots of questions here, some longer ones. A short one picking up here. What is your opinion on capacity auctions?
I had that question a lot. I have no strong view because there is a dominant seller. And I can't understand the trend in the offer curve, if you see what I mean. Yeah. Between one auction and the other, the prices are changing, and I don't understand, put it that way.
Hard to read what's behind that, yeah.
Yes. I thought, in 2017, you would be able to find trends, with the lowest availability nukes, etc. But to be honest with you, it didn't really work. So I find it very, very difficult to have a view. And if I'm not mistaken, I just had the time to look at that before this webinar. Today there was an auction that cleared way below where OTC market was trading. So I'm definitely not the only one struggling to make sense of the price there.
Just summing it up a little bit, you have as well clients in France, but as well in Germany and other countries. Do you see growing interest regarding the French market from international players, or how do you perceive that at the moment?
Yes, I mean, so we certainly see interest from international companies, especially in the US, entering not only European markets, but France too. I mean, I think there is a lot that are coming only for the carbon market. but still we're seeing people trading the power markets.
I mean, this is what we hear as well, that lots of US players are attracted now, let's say in the last 1.5 years, by the carbon market, but power markets as well to Europe. So could be have an interesting effect.
Absolutely. But you know how they are, the US players, they come and go, really. You know, they were, I mean, the American banks were very, very big 15 years ago. Then they went nowhere to be seen, then they're back. So, but at the moment they're back, I would say.
That's exactly, that's what we hear as well. And let's wait if this is a sustainable trend or lead to some changing effects as well in the composition of the market. Very good. I think we are about to finish, and I just can thank you, Emeric. If there are additional questions, please reach out to us or to Emeric directly.
Yeah, reach out to me. I'll be very happy. I mean, I'm just seeing a couple of questions on the chat. I'll be very happy. Very interesting topics.
Exactly. You will have a look at that and see if there's something you want to pick up again. Thanks a lot for the moment. I think a good start for us as well, looking into specific markets. We have a special episode as well, I think next time on the Spanish market, next quarter, look beyond the Spanish market, functioning very differently than the French, but extremely interesting to learn in such a short time from you as an expert. Thanks a lot. Hope to see you soon.
You're welcome.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Bye-bye.